And I've not been a prosecutor, although I practice law,
I think
so I'm
it
not
was
familiar.
broadly held. Was the
Yeah,
word.
broadly held position in the office. Thank you. I want to just read this. In 2007, Acosta signed a non-prosecution deal in which he agreed not to pursue federal charges against Epstein or 4 women who the government said procured girls for him. In exchange, Epstein agreed to plead guilty to a solicitation charge in state court, accept a 13-month sentence, register as a sex offender, and pay restitution to the victims identified in the federal investigation. Quote, this agreement will not be made part of any public record, the deal between Epstein and Acosta says. What is the reason why a deal of this kind has this specification that it will not be made part of the federal record? It will not be made part of any public record.
Senator, I wish I could respond to that. You're asking for deliberate. I hesitate not because of concerns, but because this is a matter that's pending litigation. Let me try to answer your question.
Maybe you can answer it generally. I understand.
In a different way. There are times when, in negotiating an outcome, there are agreements that are made that are ancillary, and so what we sought and what we presented at the very beginning was 2 years plus registration plus individuals victims being able to seek restitution. What was obtained was 18 months plus registration plus individuals being able to.
This says 13 months. I don't know. Is that
the agreement called for 18 months? As it was applied by the state of Florida, it ended up being 13 months, which is a separate issue. And so ultimately, there were other provisions that are part of that, and that is part of the give and take of a negotiation.
And I understand your concern since the matter is still pending, but as a general matter, if something is allowed to be part of the public record, then more people become aware of it. In this case, there were allegations that I guess eventually somewhat more than 36 women had been victimized by the individual. If something is allowed to be public, it informs the public and provides opportunities for people to come forward. If something is not is prohibited from being part of any public record, it has a way of making it more difficult for people to bring forward claims. Isn't that accurate?
Senator, something that I think has changed over time is trust of government. And I think that that's relevant to the issue that you raised, because there was a time when keeping something, when having something confidential was less of an issue. But the public expectation today is that things be very public. And if there is something that I have learned or thought about, is how careful someone should be when something is not made public, because often a very positive outcome, again, not talking about this case, but generally, a very positive outcome can become a negative outcome, not because of a change in the underlying substance, but because by something not looking public, it is looked at with suspicion.
This is a question. The U.S. Attorney position is a position of great power, and you're dealing with a lot of people who are in very vulnerable positions. The Secretary of Labor position is a position of great power, and you'll also be responsible for situations when there are a lot of vulnerable people. This is why I've been asking this question. Let me ask one other one. During the campaign, President Trump often ridiculed the BLS unemployment numbers, calling them, quote, phony or, quote, a hoax. Will you commit to keeping the Bureau of Labor and Statistics independent and maintain and defend the integrity of its conclusions and data?
Senator, I'll answer your question, but if I could circle back, I just want to make one final point. At the end of this case, I received a telephone call from the special agent in charge of the FBI who had been part of this entire process and had been at the meetings and had been involved. And he called to just say, congratulations. This was really hard fought and well won. And I say that because this really was a point of pride. And there was a New York Times article that was written concurrent to this that said, but then the United States Attorney's Office in Miami became involved. Last summer, initially, the Epstein team was elated Mr. Epstein would avoid prison. But then the United States Office became involved. And last summer, Mr. Epstein got an ultimatum. Plead guilty to charge that would require him to register as a sex offender, or the government would charge him with sexual tourism.
Since you've added on, then I want to add on, you are aware that Mr. Epstein served that 13 months. He was allowed out during the day, and he had to sleep at a county jail, but he was basically allowed to move and go around the community and do whatever he wants. And then that became a subject of significant criticism.
And I am on record condemning that, and I think that was awful.
And you would say that was a state, that was a problem with the way the state administered the state sentence.
Yes, and I think it was wrong.
Okay. And then how about on the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
So on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, briefly, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has kept statistics for decades, and it has a procedure. It's a transparent procedure that makes clear how they calculate, that publishes for public comment any changes that may take place. And I think that procedure is very important because BLS keeps data that is used not just for today, but for the future. Mm-hmm. And I think that process is very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Kaine. Senator Warren.